From what I understand, his genius was for coming up with kind of wild, amazing things that nobody had ever seen before. He just did a fantastic job of that, and I guess he was my kind of guy.
Rubber ducky, you're the one.
With the success of Sesame Street, Jim Henson had become an icon in the world of children's television. But Jim didn't want to get stuck there. After all, his early work, like Sam and Friends, had been geared toward adults, and he wanted to do more of that.
And at that point, I think he was frustrated because he was saying, well, hang on, the Muppets, we've been performing in Las Vegas, and we do the Ed Sullivan Show. This was the only kid show we did just because it's a big hit. Doesn't mean that's all we can do. That's not what we ever were.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Muppets Valentine Show.
Jim had been given the opportunity to produce several television specials, but he wanted more. Then, in 1975, Jim was asked to do Muppet sketches for a new NBC late-night show called Saturday Night Live.
I had enormous respect for Jim, and it was fine for me wherever he was going to head, you know, because it would at least be interesting.
This is the mighty Favard. How many in your party?
Jim's segments were dramatically different from what the audience had come to expect from him.
What are you doing, hater?
Why? Nobody quite knew what to do with the Muppets on Saturday Night Live because, and they were, of course, they were given a little more latitude there, so what they did was a little weirder, a little more on the edge.
What I want, Angel Buns, is not on the menu. Come here, you. Yeah.
We certainly didn't get Kermit.
Sweetheart.
I would have much preferred Kermit and the sort of more joyous characters, but there were really some really funny characters in it, and it had a real freshness to it.
The cast of Saturday Night Live became the hit, not Jim Henson's Muppets. In fact, the Muppets were gone after just one season.
Chevy and Danny and everybody got really, really popular and created a different style of comedy to the degree that we didn't really fit in the show anymore. But he was, I think, not disappointed as much as excited the next step he was going on.
Jim finally got the opportunity that he was looking for. He had produced a pilot for a primetime Muppet show, but again, the networks weren't interested. The pilot, however, was seen by British entertainment tycoon Lord Lou Grade, who put Jim's new show into worldwide syndication.
It's time to play the music. It's time to light the light. It's time to meet the Muppets on the Muppet Show tonight.
In 1976, The Muppet Show premiered. It was a variety show with a cast of odd yet delightful Muppet co-stars.
By the time I did The Muppet Show, I'd run into Fozzie Bear, and Miss Piggy joined us at that point, and Gonzo, of course, and all those guys, Rizzo the Rat, all those people.
The Muppet Show was so much fun. So much fun. We had such a wonderful bunch of friends there. And all these stars came through every week. Oh, it was great.
Soon, the Muppet set was the place to be. Again, the biggest celebrities couldn't wait to perform with Jim Henson's Muppets.
Hey, fellas, you know, I really don't mind your drilling for oil in my dressing room, but your camel just stepped on my guitar and broke it.
Do not worry about the guitar. We will buy you a new one.
It was hilarious. I mean, it was great. Not just my family, everybody. I mean, other entertainers were going, wow, I mean, you were there with Miss Piggy and Kermit, so it doesn't get any better than that.
It just exploded. Everybody wanted the show. Everybody, I mean, they just were standing in line. It was just extraordinary.
Hey, how do you get ideas for all those songs?
New ideas. Jim Henson was always open to them.
I told him that I'd always, in watching his show, I was always curious about the fact that there was never any real look or experiment with African culture or African American culture. But in particular, African songs or African material. And he said that he'd be most encouraged to look into that world.
We come from the mountain, on the mountain, go back to the mountain, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, leaning on the mountain.
I was just absolutely astounded and overwhelmed with the beauty of it and the magic of it and how real it was.
Real, but very zany.
Say oodie boo boo boo. Say what? Boo boo boo. Say oodie boo 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 boo. Oodie boo boo boo. Now will you get off the stage?
Kermit was the only Muppet to cross over from Sesame Street. This gave Jim the opportunity to develop his character more, and as Kermit's performer, to express himself a little more. Many suggest the frog was Jim's alter ego.
Well, there's something about Kermit the Frog that always has reminded me of Jim Henson. Somehow they were a lot alike.
If people want to think my father was like Kermit, they pretty darn close, really. I mean, Kermit and my father were pretty much one and the same in a lot of ways.
I think it was very easy for Jim to talk through Kermit and work with Kermit because it was so much part of, he was so much part of him.
They were like trying to be in charge, but not quite in control. Got all these crazies running around, creating chaos. They're just trying to keep it all together.
Kermit, is it always like this on the show?
Oh, how do you mean?
Well, all this craziness.
Oh, well, this is actually a rather quiet show for us. No unforeseen disasters so far.
Hurry up, guys!
The Muppet Show aired for 5 seasons, and it was the greatest international hit of its time, airing in more than 100 countries. At its peak, The Muppet Show was seen each week by 235 million viewers.
Decent, fair, great, I loved it, go on!
Jim didn't think of it in hit terms. He got to have control and play and create whatever he wanted. And that was a joy. And he loved it.
Soon, Jim found a new playground for his Muppets, the movies.
Moving those characters outside into actual locations, into the real universe, you know, was, I think, a first.
For the Muppets' second movie, Brian Henson was now officially on his dad's film crew.
What we did in Great Muppet Caper was we said, okay, now we've seen Kermit on a bicycle, now let's see how far we can push it. We'll get them doing figure eights, and we'll get them going around in circles around each other.
Yes, couldn't we ride side by side?
He always pushed the envelope, but he just loved breaking barriers. He just loved breaking barriers.
The story runs deeper than you know.
Jim's next experiment took him to darker, more sophisticated puppetry in film.
After the success of The Muppet Show, then he wanted to break new ground and wanted to really experiment and to get out and to think new thoughts, to create new characters, new ways of approaching puppetry and what became the Dark Crystal.
Cheryl Henson worked with her father on the Dark Crystal, developing techniques that would make Jim's Muppets appear more alive.
We've got to get them out.
The Dark Crystal was the first all-puppet fantasy film that was really ever done, where there are no humans at all. The idea that he was actually going to be creating a completely new world.
I wanted to create the world first. I wanted to start with a visual world of what these characters looked like and what the whole place was.
The prophecy didn't say anything about this.
Movie executives did not go along for the ride.
The lights went on, and they stood up and walked out. And Jim was so depressed from that. And he was depressed from some of the reviews. But you know, I think he would have preferred to be in this position by trying something that pushes the envelope than just being safe.
Jim tried his hand once more with a live-action fantasy film. Labyrinth was released in 1986.
What kind of magic spell to use? Slime and snails, or puppy dog tail.
When Labyrinth was not a commercial success, that, I think, did. That was quite a blow to him. At that point, I think he was starting to feel like, I love the Muppets, but I have more in me. Why did this not work? How could this not have worked?
Around that time, Jim and Jane separated after 27 years of marriage. He became deeply introspective and took stock of the world that surrounded him.
It was the first time I ever saw him not want to work, was during that period. There was a few months there that he didn't want to work. He wanted to travel and stop and think and reflect a little, and that was when he wrote those letters to us.
Those letters were not to be read until Jim Henson's death.